Donald Trump, and by extension his lawyers, love to have little outbursts in court. They love to snicker, they love to yell, they love to basically just act like people who didn't go to law school or even know how cases work. And now, with his first criminal trial set to begin in New York on March 25th, a trio of legal experts has warned that the behavior that Trump and his lawyers engaged in both of the civil trials that we've seen with E. Jean Carroll and the New York fraud trial, that kind of stuff isn't going to fly in a criminal trial. Now, to be fair, it didn't fly in the civil trials either. And, Donald Trump was sanctioned. He had the gag order put on him. He was yelled at by the judge. His lawyers were yelled at by the judge. But again, those were civil trials. The rules are completely different in criminal trials. We kept talking about the fact that, Trump keeps violating the gag order. Why is Judge Engoron only fining him and not throwing him in jail? Well, in a civil matter, jail is typically never going to be an option. But in a criminal trial, jail is typically the first option. Which means when Donald Trump pisses off the judge, Judge Juan Merchan, in this particular case in the criminal trial, he doesn't have to sit there and say, I'm going to sanction you $10,000. He can say, I'm holding you in contempt, bailiff, remand him, take him away. That's what will happen. Let me read you this from these legal experts who include Norm Eisen, Joshua Kolb, and Barbara McQuaid. They wrote, quote, "We all saw the spectacle that Mr. Trump created in the New York State civil fraud trial, but we also saw Mr. Trump reined in by federal Judge Lewis Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll case, which, unlike the civil fraud one, featured a jury watching every move. Judge Merchan is cut more from the cloth of Judge Kaplan. He is a widely respected and experienced jurist. Moreover, criminal trial rules and practice give him even more latitude than Judge Kaplan had in the E. Jean Carroll civil matter. With a jury in the box, Judge Merchan is unlikely to tolerate repeated outbursts. We got a taste of that at the hearing last week when he repeatedly and summarily shut down frivolous objections from Mr. Trump's counsel. The seriousness of the prosecution can also be conveyed at sentencing. If Mr. Trump is convicted, Mr. Bragg should seek jail time. Each count of document falsification carries a term of up to 4 years in prison. Many individuals, including first-time offenders, are sentenced to imprisonment for this crime in New York." And in case you're wondering what happened at the hearing last week, let me read you this from Raw Story. Trump and his attorneys were repeatedly chided for courtroom outbursts by both Engoron and Kaplan in those cases, and the former president often ranted to reporters outside the courtroom, but he might not get away with such misbehavior in criminal court. Last week at that hearing, they had repeated outbursts. His lawyers got admonished by the judge. This is going to happen. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when. Donald Trump cannot control himself. And by the way, those outbursts don't have to be limited to the courtroom. If Donald Trump goes home after a day of the trial and he gets on Truth Social and he starts ranting and raving about the judge or the prosecution or anything about the case, they can be called back into court immediately, and the judge can hold Donald Trump in contempt and put him away. And say, I'm going to have to remand you to custody until this trial is over because these posts on Truth Social, we got a jury box. This is jury tampering. This is undue influence on that jury. You cannot do this. Now, I imagine the judge will probably give him a warning first. Trump will end up violating it because he'll go to a rally and say something there. But I think there's a good possibility before the criminal trial even concludes that Donald Trump will probably have spent at least one night in jail because he simply cannot control himself. And the judge in this case is going to have a lot more leeway to do that than the previous two civil judges did.